Grindhouse horror was never about polish. It was cigarette burns in the corner of the frame, sound that came a half-second late, and blood that looked more real because it was the wrong color. You watched it because it didn't beg you to believe. It just rolled the film and let the monsters walk in. These aren't legends you heard secondhand from a cousin's friend. These are nights people survived because something worse than their hunter carved a line in the dark and said, "Mine." When the pack stalked, when the dead flooded a night clerk's aisles, when clowns from nowhere built tents out of sky and static, he stepped in. Not a hero, not a savior. Just the hollow man, wearing a face that isn't a face, ending hunts because he hates rivals. Story 1. Hollow versus the pack. They told the sheriff the road was bad luck, but he said bad luck doesn't leave claw marks on asphalt. That's what the kids hit first. The grooves that didn't make sense, like something paced the shoulder too long and too heavy. Their Civic coughed twice, died at a bend where the guardrail sagged like a broken rib, and the woods exhaled a smell that sat wrong in the lungs. Wet pennies, dog fur, and old meat. Someone joked about werewolves. No one laughed. The trees did a trick with the wind that made the shadows wag their tails. The howl didn't arc like a movie cue. It punched low, a bass note that ran through their knees. Then came the answering sounds, 5 voices, then 7, then something that wasn't quite a voice but teeth clacking in rhythm. When the headlights blinked out for good, the forest gave them the shapes. Too tall at first, then down on all fours, then taller again with shoulders that rolled under split shirts. You can tell yourself a lot of stories in a crisis. This wasn't coyotes. This was the pack. Hannah ran first, the flashlight doing a strobe in her shaking hand. The beam found eyes that weren't animal yellow. They were a human blue filmed over, a green that had forgotten what pupils were, an amber boiling like syrup. Behind her, Tyler dragged the jack handle and kept saying he had a plan that sounded like hit them and keep hitting them, which only works if nothing hits back harder. Something brushed his calf. He swung. The sound that came out of the trees was half laugh, half cough. They split without meaning to. That's how the pack likes it. Cut the herd, run the weak to the edge of breath, circle anyone who trips. One of the boys did, his palms skidding through gravel and glass. The closest shape dropped to a crouch and unfolded its mouth like canvas, second row of teeth glistening like they'd just grown in for the feast. If you only watched from a distance, you would have missed what happened because it was quiet, faster than the audio could track. The shape jerked. Something had its throat. He walked out like a film splice, there between frames, already moving. The hollow man's mask doesn't shine. It absorbs, like bone that's been in the dirt long enough to remember dark. In one hand, he held the pack thing by the neck as if it weighed nothing. In the other, a curve of shadow that might have been a blade, or might have been what blades try to be when they dream. He didn't look at the kids. He looked past them, counting predators. The pack answered in tactics. 2 split left, claws whispering across bark. 1 took the guardrail and sprang, metal screaming. The hollow man let the first body come to him, stepped inside its reach, and turned its charge into a fold you could feel in your own spine. Something cracked like a car hood slamming shut. Another lunged low, and he met it with his knee. There was the wet gong of cartilage giving up. No grunts, no hero grit, just work, efficient, pitiless, practiced. They tried numbers. Predators always think math is on their side. 4 at once, breath fogging, paws drumming fallen leaves into dust. The hollow man pivoted on the white line like it was a stage mark, and things fell. I don't mean down, down is mercy. They folded around their middles, legs kicking after their heads were already elsewhere, bodies learning new angles. The mask tilted once, like he was bored with how easy these wolves forgot they used to be men. Hannah reached the ditch, her shoe sinking to the ankle in runoff that smelled like the metal taste of fear. A shape hit the water beside her and rose the way a mistake does, fast and wrong. It had a necklace of old hospital bracelets digging into furred skin. It grabbed her by the coat. The hollow man took its wrist and squeezed. The bracelets popped one after another. little white tombstones spinning into the ditch. He dragged the thing into the center of the road, made it look at the others, and ended it in a way that felt like punctuation. Silence took a minute to believe in. The forest re-threaded its night sounds around the bodies. Tyler tried to thank him, words tumbling in a pile that meant, "Please don't decide we're next." The hollow man didn't face Tyler. He faced the trees, listening. Two of the pack limped out of sight, one back leg pinwheeling at the wrong angle, one leaving lines on bark like a child's drawing of rain. He didn't chase. He doesn't chase. If a thing can run, it can spread a story. He walked the kids back to the dead Civic like a shepherd who hates the job. Hannah saw her reflection in the mask for a heartbeat, stretched, thin, like a face pressed against glass from the wrong side. He set the jack handle on the hood, tapped the metal with a rhythm the woods answered, and the car coughed to life without a key in the ignition. It's not kindness when a storm stops. It's weather finishing a thought. He made the engine idle and stepped backward into the kind of darkness that accepts you if you know its name. The sheriff found where the bodies had been dragged and pretended coyotes again because that lie files better. The kids left town before daylight like they were cheating on morning. Someone came back later and spray-painted one sentence on the guardrail. The wolves were afraid of something. It stayed there until a county crew sanded it to a ghost. It doesn't matter. The metal remembers. Stories like this have been submitted by viewers who claim the Hollow Man followed them. If anything strange has happened to you, leave it in the comments. Story 2. Hollow Zombie Attack. The tape was labeled 03:11 a.m. Outside, a cheap dome camera pointed at a forecourt no one had cleaned since last July. Moths jittered like static in the light cone. Then the first figure hobbled in, dragging a leg that left a dark crayon line of something thick. His head tipped at an angle that said the spine had given up arguing. He pressed his face to the glass door and left a half-moon of grease and blood. The jaw was wrong, too thin at the hinge, too wide at the bite, and when it slid lower, teeth scraped squeak, squeak, squeak down the pane. Inside, the clerk did the thing we all do when we're in over our heads. He grabbed for a rule. Lock the door, hit the silent button, keep the counter between you and the problem. The door had already been locked. The button clicked and did nothing. The counter was particle board with 1,000 knife scars that suddenly felt like a map for where the night would go. A trucker at the coffee machine said, "Jesus," and then the other shapes arrived. Zombies don't move like movies unless you've seen enough nights that you know how bodies break. They bumped each other. They forgot to coordinate. One crawled because legs were optional. One tried the handle with gentle patience like a man arriving home sober and polite. The clerk yelled there was nothing for them here, which is not a sentence the dead care about. The glass broke from the bottom corner up like a picture frame cracking around a face. Cold ran in before they did. The first one over the threshold didn't look dead until his mouth opened and kept opening, cheeks tearing on scar lines that had healed wrong and healed again. He got a handful of the trucker's jacket and took a souvenir of denim and skin. The trucker swung a steel thermos and bent it. Teenagers came up from the snack aisle with a curtain rod and a broom handle taped with box cutter blades that should have worked until a body that doesn't know fear teaches you what tools are for. When the lights died, the sound kept going for a second, the refrigerators humming, the open sign buzzing, like the film Lost Picture, and the audio ran forward. In the dark, people make plans that are mostly wishes. The clerk whispered back door, and the teenagers whispered bathroom, and the trucker whispered a prayer you only say when you believe it and know it won't help. Then the light stuttered, and there was a new shape behind the counter, pale, tall, with a mask that didn't reflect the fluorescence. The tape jitters here, like the camera's nerve failed. He doesn't swing wildly, he chooses. A body turns and a hand arrives at its jaw, guiding it down hard into the edge of the register. Ding! And the skull caves the way rotten fruit collapses when you set it wrong. Another comes low and he shifts the shove so the bones bend before they break, because breaking sprays, and he doesn't like mess he doesn't choose. The teenagers don't see him move, they see outcomes. A wrist that's a question mark, a throat that forgot to hold blood. Someone says thank you, a raw thread of sound that shouldn't be in this store. He ignores it. He steps into the aisle and meets a crawler with a heel, the sound that comes up through tile and into your teeth when something more than bone cracks. He twists ahead to face the camera, and for a second you think he wants you to witness, and then you realize he wants the dead on the tape to be doing something that isn't alive. He is curating. The last one is fast, because sometimes the dead remember sprinting. It takes the trucker down at the knees and leans in for the throat, and the hollow man is already there. And the whole thing becomes choreography. Grab, pull, place, end, like he's been rehearsing long enough to hate improvisation. The trucker doesn't bleed out. His breath stutters a few times like a bad engine, then steadies. No one moves. The clerk grips the phone even though the line is dead. The teenagers clutch their taped-up spear like they're at the dumbest Renaissance fair. The hollow man stands still while everybody finds their heartbeat again. Then slowly he turns and looks up at the domed camera. He doesn't wave, he doesn't threaten. He just tilts his head in a way that says, "Edit this however you want, but tell it right." The clerk swears he whispered a word. Not a warning and not a comfort. He won't repeat it, not to the cops, not to the kid at the next register over, not to his mother when she asks why he quit that night and won't drive the bypass anymore. The rumor says the word was a name. The rumor says it wasn't his. By morning, corporate sent a crew to bleach and repaint. They replaced the busted glass with thicker panes and put a second camera over the register. The trucker got stitches at a clinic that smelled like lemon cleaners and old bandages. The teenagers told the story 5 times and each version made them braver. The clerk put in his notice. Somebody else covered the graveyard shift. That person lasted 3 nights. If you're still watching, you're not alone. Most people turn this off by now. But you want to see what happens next. Maybe you should stick around, or subscribe before it gets worse. Story 3. Hollow vs. the Killer Clowns from Another World. The tents arrived like mushrooms after rain. Red, blue, yellow, but the colors were off. Like they'd been printed with a spectrum we don't have a name for yet. No trucks, no tire tracks, no permit taped to a pole. By noon, ringed flags fluttered on lines that weren't attached to anything. By dusk, the calliope music started. Notes that almost made a song if you stood close. Notes that sounded like a misfiring engine if you stepped back. People who went to look didn't come back with phone footage. They came back quiet, mouths sugar-burned by cotton candy that dissolved into foam if you swallowed wrong. The clowns waved from the dark between tent flaps, faces not painted but grown, skin stretched into fixed expressions that fought the muscles underneath. Eyes too round, irises too wide, smiles that made too much room for too many teeth. When they laughed, it sounded like tape rewinding. Night fell, and the town's curiosity turned into screaming that nobody wanted to own. A woman searching for her nephew ducked under a flap and saw rope. So much rope, knotted into nets that looked like digestive tracts, and balloons pulsing on strings like hearts remembering beats. A clown sidled near, its shoes whispering against dirt, and the smell of it hit her, sweet and wrong, like carnival treats left in a hot car. It lifted a gloved finger to shush her, and the glove was skin. The hollow man doesn't announce himself. The tent seam parted like fabric, changing its mind, and he was inside, mask pale as a curtain ghost. The nearest clown grinned wider, which should have been impossible, and went for the throat with a seltzer flower that hissed steam the color of antifreeze. He stepped through it, unfazed, and pulled the hose out by its root with a sound like someone emptying a sink full of glass. Clowns, from wherever they came, are pack animals too, but not wolves. More like cuttlefish, changing shape, telegraphing color, giggling in chords. They swarmed with props that weren't props, ribbons that tightened to wire, juggling pins that flared into bone clubs, a slapstick that really did. He moved among them without noticing the jokes. When he broke one, it leaked light, thin and bright, like the glow you get behind your eyelids when you look toward the sun too long, and the light ran across the sawdust and vanished into the seams. The survivors tied up in rope guts watched with the stunned focus of people who can't afford to misread a miracle. He cut them loose not by slicing but by untying knots faster than hands move in a fair world, pulling loops that were never roped to begin with. He was rough. He turned faces the way you turn a mannequin's, checking for markings. One woman gagged on cotton candy that had melted into a choking paste. He tore it out like a mechanic clearing a flooded line. She breathed because he allowed it. A clown with a head-neck ruffle like gills hissed and threw a pie. It hit a post and burned through canvas like acid, hissing letters that spelled shapes your eyes didn't want. He caught the clown by the ruffle and twisted until the gills opened wide enough to show there weren't lungs behind them, just a hollow where laughter lived. He reached in and crushed whatever made the sound. Outside, the sky buckled a little, the way heat makes roads ripple. Posters nailed themselves to fence posts with tiny invisible hammers. The paper looked old the second it touched wood. They showed the show times, the tent, the ringmaster, then the frames flickered, and the ringmaster wore a mask made of absence, and the text under the image didn't read, "Admit one" anymore. It read, "Transferred." The last clown ran not toward an exit, but toward the place where the tent fabric sagged like gravity gathered there. The hollow man followed. The survivors heard the laughing change key behind that droop, heard it go minor and mean, then heard nothing at all. When the tent collapsed, it fell slow, like parachute silk, and left only bare dirt with circles pressed into it, a geometry that didn't match the poles. People stumbled out with rope burns and chemical tastes in their mouths and stories they wouldn't get right no matter how often they tried. The calliope went silent. The flags hung without wind. Across the field, the new posters brightened under no light, and the image finished developing. The hollow man standing in the ring with a top hat in one hand and something that might be a heart in the other. He hadn't posed. The world had. By morning, the grass had grown back where the tent had been, but crooked, like it remembered weight. Kids picked up confetti that was really shed clown skin, then dropped it when it warmed in their palms. The town scraped the posters down. That night, more grew in their place, ink still wet. He doesn't rescue to be thanked. He rescues to reset the board, then waits for the next rival to climb up and claim his audience. New horror drops every Hollow Wednesday. Subscribe before he finds someone else.